Welcome to our Advent series of Abide in Beauty, a series of 5 Visio Divina, which explores Advent art to draw us closer to this season. This week we'll be praying with Mariotto Albertinelli's Visitation. Let's orient ourselves before we enter into the prayer proper. The main image is an altarpiece designed to sit in the chapel of the Visitation in Florence. The bottom part of the painting is a predella sitting between the altar and the altarpiece. It contains 3 other scenes from the life of Mary: the Annunciation, the Nativity, and the presentation of Jesus. Now, let's set ourselves for deeper prayer. Quieten your being by closing off any distractions, any stray thoughts. Focus on your breathing. Ponder the image. Open your heart to the scene. Look at the arches framing the scene. The columns. The sky. The field on which they are standing. The pyramidal composition formed by the 2 main figures. The predella, or altarpiece support, has 3 scenes: the Annunciation, the Nativity, and the presentation of Jesus. On the right is Elizabeth. Notice her clothing, her posture, her hands, Mary, her clothing, her posture, her hands, the expressions on Elizabeth and Mary's faces. The emotions that are conveyed. Abide for a while in the beauty of this image and notice the different ways in which the sacred is present to us. Let's listen to Luke's words about this scene. In Luke's Gospel, the Visitation is immediately after the Annunciation, and it leads into Mary's great prayer, the Magnificat, which we'll look at later. A reading from the Gospel according to St. Luke. In those days, Mary set out and went with haste to a Judean town in the hill country, where she entered the house of Zechariah and greeted Elizabeth. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the child leapt in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit and exclaimed with a loud cry, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. And why has this happened to me, that the mother of my Lord comes to me? For as soon as I heard the sound of your greeting, the child in my womb leapt for joy. And blessed is she who believed that there would be a fulfillment of what was spoken to her by the Lord." The Gospel of the Lord. Imagine yourself in this scene. What does it feel like? What aspects of the passage are captured in the art? You know the term glimmer, those moments of light shining in the darkness or in the mundane. In a psychological sense, glimmers are the opposite of triggers, in that they are small moments that spark opposite emotions to triggers, such as joy, peace, safety, belonging. So as opposed to triggers, a glimmer will have a positive impact on our mental health and well-being, a positive impact on our souls, at least according to the Australian Psychological Association. What are the glimmers in this painting? Let's enter the prayer of consideration by looking at the historical context of the painting. The artist is Mariotto Albertinelli, a painter from Florence, who completed this work in 1503. We know this because the date is inscribed in one of the columns. This places him in the time of Leonardo, Michelangelo, and Raphael, who are active in Milan, Florence, and Rome. Its 1503 date is in the midst of the High Renaissance, that period typified by these works: Michelangelo's Pietà in 1499 and his Sistine Chapel ceiling in 1512, Leonardo's Mona Lisa 1506, The Last Supper 1498, Raphael's School of Athens 1511, and Sistine Madonna 1512. So all of these works were completed within 10 years of our Albertinelli's Visitation. This is the High Renaissance. It showed a greater use of perspective, see the Last Supper, facial expression, you can see that in the Mona Lisa and in the Sistine Madonna. Renewed interest in the classical, see the arches in the School of Athens. A greater emotional appeal. Just consider that great sculpture, the Pietà. Now, many of these elements are on display in Albertinelli's Visitation. We see perspective created by the receding arches. The arches themselves revealing the classical influences from the Roman Empire. The tender expressions of Mary and Elizabeth, as well as the emotional appeal created by their embrace. The epitome of high Renaissance art. Mariotto Albertinelli was an associate of the Dominican friar and artist Fra Bartolomeo. This work is displayed in the Uffizi in Florence, and they tell us the painting's harmonious gestures, the rapt expressions on the faces, and the simple, unadorned clothing are indicative of Mariotto's training with Fra Bartolomeo, the friend and companion who he teamed up professionally at various intervals in his artistic life. The inspiration for the painting's compositional minimalism and measured emotions is, in fact, the teachings of his Dominican friar. The painting was commissioned for the Oratorio di San Michele Vecchio in Florence, for the altar which in the first decade of the 16th century was sponsored by the Congrega della Visitazione. It's accompanied by the predella, which in this case would be above the altar but below the main painting. Remember that altars were set into the rear wall of a church. The predella is a significant frame for our prayer over the Visitation. They place the scene in the flow of Mary's growth in holiness. From the yes of the Annunciation to the sacred hospitality of the Visitation, which leads into the prayer of the Magnificat, that leads her to give birth to holiness, and finally, in this painting, to presenting Jesus for greater recognition in the presentation. The Visitation is a moment of grace in a sequence of unfolding grace. The Russian Saint Seraphim of Sarov put it this way: the purpose of human life is the acquisition of the Holy Spirit. The Visitation is a celebration and demonstration of this. And we are invited along on our own pilgrimages. Father Ron Rolheiser wrote, like Mary, we need to get pregnant by the Holy Spirit. We need to let the Word take such root in us that it begins to become part of our actual flesh. then like any woman who's pregnant, we have to lovingly gestate, nurture, and protect what is growing inside us until it's sufficiently strong so it can live on its own outside us. This process, gestation, as we know, is often accompanied by nausea, morning sickness, and a stretching of the flesh that can permanently scar the body. Eventually, of course, we must give birth. What we have nurtured and grown inside of us must, when it's ready, be given birth outside. This will always be excruciatingly painful. There's no painless way to give birth. Birth, however, is only the beginning of motherhood. And Mary gave birth to a baby, but she had to spend years nurturing, coaching, coaxing, cajoling that infant into adulthood. The infant in the crib in Bethlehem is not yet the Christ who preaches, heals, and dies for us. Every mother needs to give birth twice, once biologically and once in faith, once to an infant and once to an adult. Finally, motherhood has still one more phase. As a child grows, matures, and takes on a personality and destiny of its own, the mother at a point must ponder, as Mary did. She must let herself be painfully stretched in understanding, in not knowing, in carrying tension, in letting go. She must set free to be itself something that was once so fiercely hers. The pains of childbirth are often gentle compared to this second wrenching. Meister Eckhart wrote, "We are all meant to be mothers of God, for God is always needing to be born." Let's just take a pause to absorb the profundity of that insight and what it means for us this Advent. Another layer of reflection about the Visitation, again from Rolheiser. Christ's cousin, John the Baptist, unconsciously leaps for joy in the presence of Christ. And that reaction draws the Magnificat out of the one who is carrying the Christ. Christian de Chergé, the Trappist abbot who was martyred in Algeria in 1996, suggests that among other things, this image is the key to how we as Christians are meant to meet other religions in the world. He sees the image as illustrating this paradigm. Christianity is carrying Christ, and other religions are also carrying something divine, a divine cousin, one who points to Christ. But all of this is unconscious. We do not really grasp the bond, the connection between what we're carrying and what the other is carrying, but we will recognize their kinship, however unconsciously, when we stand before another who does not share our Christian faith, but is sincere and true to his own or her own faith. In that encounter, we'll sense the connection. What we're carrying will make something leap for joy inside the other, and that reaction will help draw the Magnificat out of us, and like Mary, we will want to stay with that other for mutual support. I dare say we can extend de Chergé and Rolheiser's image from interfaith dialogue to the challenging divides that confront us in our world. A visitation of progressive and conservative, of indigenous and settler, of male and female. Here's a provocative thought. A visitation in Gaza? Here's another view of the Visitation by Sister Mary Southard, Sister of St. Joseph. What do you see? What do you notice? Sister Mary writes, in the mystery of the Visitation, we're invited to experience our deep interconnectedness with one another and with all being. The Holy One present and alive and growing in me recognizes that same divinity in you. The consciousness of this mystery emerges as a chalice seen in the center of the painting, which holds us in communion. The third figure in the center is the embodiment of Lady Wisdom that was so beautifully described in Sister Elizabeth Johnson's Blessed is She Who Is. This is an image of the ceiling of the Interfaith Chapel in Thanksgiving Square in Dallas, Texas. To me, it suggests the unfolding power of the Annunciation leading to the Visitation and the Magnificat, to the Nativity, to the Epiphany, to the Presentation, to the Baptism, to the proclamation of the reign of God. It resonates with this further observation by Sister Elizabeth Johnson on the Visitation. Here's a rare glimpse of female reproductive power as both physically nurturing and politically revolutionary. The two pregnant women beat the drum of God's world revolution, starting with the option for debased women and then including all the starving, powerless, and oppressed. Clearly, this is a picture of Mary that is complete opposite of the passive, humbled handmaid of the patriarchal imagination. It portrays women looking to each other for validation of their authority rather than to men. Let's ponder over these insights and images. We used the word glimmer earlier. Those flashes of light that are the opposite of triggers. What have been your glimmerings this evening? What has brought you joy? What has brought you closer to God? For what are you grateful? Consider those visitations in your own life that console you, and those visitations that you need to make that you will need consoling for. In what way are you singing your Magnificat? We'll conclude with two artistic responses to our Visio Divina of the Visitation. An icon written by Kelly Latmore, Love Forever Being Born. It was inspired by a poem by Sister Ilia Delio. What do the stars say? The light that meets our eyes after millions of years summons us to look beyond. The dark that hovers over us is filled with light. That underneath the appearance of the stable heavens is the bubbling energy of the universe. We are forming and nothing can stop us. There is a palpable power of attraction pulling us towards we know not where. Love alone is the guide of the universe, and the whole universe is in the human heart. Tend to the heart, and the power of love will name itself as God. Love. The universe is being born over and over, dying and expanding. In life there is inevitably death, yet in death there is always new life.